Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the 15th annual Shorecast, which is a panel discussion looking forward to the summer to see what to expect for the summer season. This is presented by the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism in the School of Business at Stockton University, also known as LIGHT. I'm the faculty director of LIGHT, Jane Buchanevich, and I'll be moderating the panel today. We have a very distinguished panel of experts. And before we get into the questions for the panelists, I have just a few brief comments to set the stage for the discussion. Okay, so we do two of these types of webinars. The first one is the Shorecast looking towards the summer, and the second one is in the fall looking back at the fall. So I'm going to just go over a few things recapping last summer's results. So when we did Shoreview in the fall, our panelists reported that there was an impact from inflation and from the rising gas prices on last year's summer season. They also reported that labor shortages were a problem and that it also increased the cost of labor, so costs were an issue. The hotel operators reported that the housekeeping shortage was so severe that sometimes they couldn't even fill the hotel because they couldn't clean the rooms. So those were the big issues facing last summer, as reported by our panelists. So I have some data to show you. We were hoping that the New Jersey tourism data would be out before this webinar, but it wasn't. So I prepared some slides from last summer based on the information that we had available publicly. So this is comparing 19, 20, 21, and 22 for the 3 months, June, July, and August. Passengers on the Atlantic City Expressway at the Pleasantville tolls were down slightly below 2021 and also below 2019. So that was a sign that perhaps gas prices had some impact on the summer visitation. Brick and mortar casino revenue, for the most part, it was up over 2021, but it was not up over 2019 except for July. July was a very good month, but June and August were down slightly below 2019. Convention delegate spending was way up in July over 2021. I didn't have 2019 data available to me, but delegate spending was up except for the month of August, but it was way up in July. The hotel and motel tax by county, the counties are blue Cape May, orange Ocean County, and gray Atlantic County. The hotel motel tax was up for all 3 counties above 2021 and above 2019. So that was a very good sign. Unfortunately, casino employment is still down. It was up slightly over 21, but it's still about a little more than 5,000 jobs short of how it was in 2019 before the pandemic. And the AC luxury tax did have a very good result. 22 was higher than 21 and also higher than 2019. Okay, so now that I've given you a little overview of the results of last summer, let's hear what our panelists have to say about last year and also this year. So I'm going to ask the panelists to please introduce yourselves to the audience, and then we'll get right into the questions. So, Michael?
My name is Michael Brennan. I'm chef and owner of Cardinal in Atlantic City. We just opened about 2 weeks ago. Prior to that, I was the executive chef and director of food and beverage of Josie Kelly's in Summers Point and Cardinal Bistro in Ventnor.
Hi all, I'm Oliver Cook, associate professor of economics at Stockton University. Happy to be with you.
Morning, Jim Murata. I'm the regional director of sales for Caesars Entertainment. I oversee the convention sales efforts for Tropicana, Harrah's, and Caesars.
Hi, I'm Ben Rose. I'm Director of Marketing and Public Relations for the Greater Wildwoods Tourism Authority and First Vice President of New Jersey Tourism Industry Association.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. So the first question I'd like to ask, you're all from different segments of the industry. From your perspective, how did the tourism industry perform in 2022? Let me start with Oliver, and then we'll go to the other panelists.
I think last season was a banner year, really, overall. I mean, you just showed some of the data from last year. I think that this was in part, a continuation of, some of the kind of COVID rebound effect in some sense. I think that there's obviously been a lot of fiscal stimulus provided over the last couple of years, in particular, during the COVID fallout, and I think all of that really, was something that in the broader kind of regional economy, I think last summer was very, very robust for everyone across the board.
Michael, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so I kind of have a unique view on this. I live in Atlantic City, and I look at this from more of a hyper-local perspective. Viewing Atlantic City and specifically my little slice of the world in the Orange Loop there, I saw this great growth and boom of people wanting to check out this little segment of Atlantic City, being the Orange Loop, New York Ave in particular. And in 2022, I thought that was more present than ever. People are coming out after being kind of caged up for so long and wanting to explore different things. There's new operators opening up on the block, new entertainment venues, and people wanting to come out and experience this so-called normalcy that they've been deprived of. So I feel like we have this incremental growth of this local tourism segment of business happening, and what could happen in the future is very exciting too.
Great, thank you. Jim?
Sure. So from a casino's perspective, I think the casino numbers were really good last summer. From the convention sales perspective, we had some huge citywide conventions in last July and August. I don't think our friends at Visit Atlantic City get enough credit sometimes, but we had the NAACP in last year. We had in the Pakistani Physicians Association over at Harrah's. It was like 2,000 room nights. BMM was another regional conference that came in through Meet AC. The city brought in 2 huge concerts last year. You had the Fish concert, you had the Tidal Wave concert, which is coming back again. So all those things put together led to a really, really good summer last year.
Excellent, thank you. And Ben, how about from Wildwood's perspective?
Well, I think, Wildwood and Cape May County, we've seen consistent growth over the last 7 or 8 years. 2019 was a record year, and then, of course, the pandemic hit in 2020, and everything shut down. But coming out of the pandemic in 2021, Cape May County and the Wildwoods had a banner record year. 2022 exceeded that by, I think, 12%. So we see that continued growth and explosion of tourism in southern New Jersey. We see that continuing into 2023.
Yeah, the one chart I showed, I forgot to point out, Cape May for the hotel and motel tax actually was higher than Atlantic City, which was quite an accomplishment for Cape May. So very, very interesting. Thank you all. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now how would you describe the current economic conditions of the region? Why don't we start with Ben?
Well, we think there's still a lot of demand out there. We see it. We're on pace right now to exceed 2022's numbers, which is very, very exciting. In polling the majority of our hotels, they're ahead of pace for this year over last year. So that's exciting news. There are some factors that I think could possibly influence spending, and that is, the pressures of inflation. Gas prices, not so much. I think gas prices do not affect our tourism base at all. We're still a tank of gas away from the majority of our visitor base, and that's not going to deter somebody. I think individual visitor spending while they're on vacation could be affected this year. But overall, we're on pace, and we're projecting to probably be on par with last year, which was a record banner year. So we're very excited about that. We see a lot of new visitors coming into the market, into southern New Jersey, and I think that's a reflection on the airline prices and the hassle of flying. People are looking for a destination closer to home, and they're also looking for experiences. They want experiences, and of course the Jersey Shore has memorable experiences that people can take with them for a lifetime.
Thank you. Jim?
So this summer, I should say we're off to a good start the first quarter. If you look at the brick and mortar numbers now, I think we're up 6% over last year. My convention business for the first quarter for the 3 properties, total revenue, my catering revenue combined with room revenue we generated through convention contracts we signed, was up 60%. So we did close to 50,000 room nights the first quarter compared to 37,000 in 2022. And just like Ben said, 2022 was a record year for us, which 2019 was a record year for us. We broke 2019's records in 2022. We're on pace to at least get to that number and slightly ahead of it. So we're forecasting about 2-3% ahead of what we did in 2022 from the convention market.
Great.
Demand's already there for the summer. You know, if you look at the rates we're promoting out there, I think they're higher rates than we did last year for the transient guests coming in. So demand is there and it's early.
Great, thank you. Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I look at this from a kind of a broader kind of 30,000-foot view, and you know, if you kind of look across the entire metropolitan areas, you know, employment base, which we have numbers on pretty, you know, consistently on a monthly basis. The employment is up first quarter this year relative to last year, somewhere around 5%, and in many cases, most importantly, in the kind of leisure and hospitality industries, it's often closer to 6 to 8% year on year. So that's a real good indication. As you kind of think about first quarter, folks really starting to, towards the end of the first quarter, start to actually, you know, gear up in payroll, start training early April so that these folks then can be, you know, ready to go opening Memorial Day weekend and whatnot. That's a pretty good indicator that, you know, local businesses are feeling pretty confident about what the summer shore season's going to look like. And you know, it's kind of a continuation of the kind of the larger economy's growth path back to kind of being close to being normal. Because at the end of last year, 2022, the economy was still down probably 3,000-4,000 jobs relative to pre-pandemic. So I think that probably at some point this year, we're kind of probably going to get back to being flat, especially if the summer shore season looks like it. It's going to be a pretty healthy one.
Excellent, thank you. And Michael, how about for the Orange Loop and for your restaurant that you just opened?
So at Cardinal, we practice this concept called elevated hospitality. And a large percentage of this idea is, how do people feel? So when we look at it, it's how do people feel in Atlantic City? No offense to my other panelists, but I think that the biggest success is getting people to come out of the casinos and be able to spend those dollars or those, you know, tourism dollars in other businesses. How do they feel traveling from the casinos down the boardwalk to the Orange Loop? So when we look at these economic circumstances, once we start to see that transient path or that loop kind of resonating around Atlantic City, I think that's going to be the true measure of success. And I don't know if there is a metrics or any type of analytics that we can put against how people feel or what their emotional state is going outside of these places where they do feel safe, inside the casinos or the conventions. But what I do see from, you know, more specifically the Orange Loop area is there's a lot of people coming down this transient market and a local market to get coffee at the coffee shop that we have there. There's people coming to the Leadership Studio, which is a community-based nonprofit free yoga studio. And now that the dispensary has legalized legal weed there, they're selling legal weed there. There's a line out the door, and all my parking spots are taken. So, as far as the current economic situation of, you know, this little piece of Atlantic City, if you will, a little monopoly piece, I think that we're positioned for a great opportunity of growth, but I don't think that we should look at that and say, this is good. I think that there's always potential in the restaurant industry. We always say, what did we do wrong? Where can we be better? How can we make this better? And I think that that's how we have to view this, economy in Atlantic City. And I think that there's a lot of operators who are positioned and poised to make that become a reality. So then more people can come in, more people can feel safe, and we can make Atlantic City, not just on paper, but in reality, the tourism district of the East Coast.
Yeah, you make a very good point, and that's something that has come up on many of the other panels that we have, the perception of safety and people, how we need to make the city comfortable for everyone to walk around. So very good, excellent point, thank you. Okay, the next question, Ben, you kind of answered this a little bit, but let's hear from the other panelists if they have anything to add. Inflation and higher gas prices were a concern in '22. Do you think that's still a concern now? So if anybody wants to jump in and answer that one.
I'll jump in.
Okay, thank you.
So just to put in perspective, an example, in 2022, I was a chef over at Josie Kelly's, and I saw a case of romaine lettuce. How much do we think a case of romaine lettuce should cost? $20, $30. That was the price. That was the average price. I saw this have an inflation up to about $125 for a case of lettuce. If you go to a restaurant and you're looking at their menu, you wouldn't expect a Caesar salad to cost you $20. But the reality was that's what restaurants had to charge within that moment to even make a profit on what was a profit maker. A lot of this had to do with growing situations, labor shortages, but also the reality of transportation. We get a large portion of our produce brought in from out of state lines. So every cent, every dollar that gets tacked on to bringing a product in-house to either a restaurant or a casino or a in-house dining kitchen adds to the end price. So what I think we're looking at now is the prices are settling as far as gas, but this is going to be the norm. We see these spikes, we see these incremental increases, we're going to continue to see that. And that's going to have a reflection on our industry. So when we look at these markets coming down here who need a tank of gas to get down here, what is the alternative? How do we get them down here, or how do we produce more of a local crowd to come in from the mainland? How do we make a more local tourism market? But I don't feel good about gas, and unfortunately I bought a car that requires premium before the pandemic, so now I'm like...
Yeah, you make a very good point. It's more than just the driving implications, it's the cost of food and transportation for deliveries. Excellent point. Anybody else? Yes,
Yeah,
Ben.
and that's one of our concerns also. Right now, the perception is the southern Jersey Shore is an affordable vacation destination. And looking at the inflationary pressures right now of rising prices on food, rising prices on hotel, the average ADR is up. We may get to a point where that perception is no longer valid. And that's an issue we're looking at right now. And the pressures on the increase in employment in labor is a tremendous pressure, especially on restaurants and really on every business. So that's a major concern going into 2024 on our end. We're looking at that. We're hoping things do change a little bit because right now prices are up, and that is a detriment to a family vacation. So that could be an issue.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Can I add to that? So,
Sure.
agree with you 100%, but I think if you have a good product, gas prices, food costs, if you have a good product, people are still going to come. So, if you look at Caesars Entertainment over the last couple of years, we got $400 million invested into the properties. New restaurants, Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen, Nobu, all these top entertainment and restaurant, new show opening up in the old Warner Theater. So those were investing money back into the property. So people are going to come, even though they're going to pay a little more in gas or a little more in food, at the restaurants, I should say, or the show tickets. I still think people are going to come.
Yeah, I largely agree. I think that, especially given air travel, which is has come off kind of the highs, but still remains pretty elevated. People are going to come. It is viewed as an affordable vacation, and to some extent, you know, people need to eat. You know, I mean, as we start like thinking about like, well, the segments, right, across where they may eat, right, they might decide they're going to reallocate their dollars, but at the end of the day, families that come are going to eat, and you know, the question is, you know, where do those dollars end up? Kind of fine dining restaurants or fast food restaurants or takeout, traditional takeout. But in terms of like dollars being left in the economy, those dollars are still going to be left in the economy, right? To some extent. So I don't know to what extent. I think, you know, and it's also true that yes, inflation has been high, but it's actually been slowing, right? And it has been slowing significantly. Last summer it was up above 9%, I believe, in July. It's closer to 5%. In fact, the inflation numbers are getting ready to drop today, I think, if I remember correctly. So there might be some silver lining, you know, looking out even 2024 to the extent that prices continue to kind of settle a little bit, you know. But we'll see.
Excellent, thank you.
add to that?
Oh yeah, sure, go right ahead.
Sorry.
No,
What I-
please.
To the point too, I think it's also interesting to look at who's coming down here. Who is the target audience? What is that demographic? Are we gaining new guests? Are we gaining new consumers? Or is it this repetition of second homes coming from one of the surrounding 5 states that we witness a majority of our transient markets coming down from? Are we gaining new people? Where are they going? So I think that's an opportunity for us to grow as far as a market. But what did we see come through the Atlantic City Toll Plaza last year? 25 million?
I forget the actual number. What's the first slide? It was, now that was for each month, so it was close to 2 million a month.
Close to 2 million a month. So we're still below 2019, even
Yeah.
throughout the past 3 years. Obviously, 2020 was a wash. I'm surprised that we got as many as we did then.
Yeah,
But is that going to continue to grow now that we have this kind of path of resistance with these elevated gas prices? I think that we are always going to have this base of people wanting to come down here. We have free beaches, we have beautiful hotels, we have wonderful conventions. Where is our new target market? As somebody who lived in Philly, like, I don't want to go down to Atlantic City, and obviously I'm from here too, so I've seen it, but like, my first choice isn't going to go to the casino. I'm going to go to the casino to have dinner, but is that going to be worth me going to Atlantic City, right? I want that. I want people to come down here, but I think we just make gas free and then let everybody come down.
great point. One thing about this expressway tolls, we don't really know if this is because of people working from home more. Like, we don't really know what
That's what I
caused
was
it.
going to ask you. Is that take a percentage into like, you know, less people are working in the city, employment's down? So
Yeah, we
it is
really
skewed
don't
a
know.
little bit with those numbers because
Yeah.
it doesn't factor in the employees driving in on a daily
Right,
basis.
and plus it could be people didn't want to pay the toll, so they took the other
Right.
methods to get
Gas
into the city.
prices are up, so I want to save on the toll money, so I came to
Yeah.
the Whitehorse Pike or the Blackhorse Pike.
So those numbers, you know, we're not sure of exactly what makes up those numbers at this point, although Anthony would love us to go get back and do a study, which we hope to do in the future. All right, let's see. So my next question was about labor, and some of you mentioned a little bit about labor, but what is the situation now? Is the labor shortage still a factor, and do you think it's going to be a factor for the summer? So maybe I'll start with you, Jim, and
Sure.
see.
I think not just here, I think nationwide, hospitality industry labor has shortages. I think it's going to be an ongoing problem, not just a 2023 problem. I think it's going to be a 2024 problem and ongoing. You know, we're doing some things around the properties to help combat that. We've added, you know, self-kiosk check-ins, online check-in, where you can check into your hotel room on your phone, get to the hotel and get your key. So we're trying to come up with ways. I actually stayed at the hotel. It was a Hilton, I believe. I was able to check in on my phone and use my phone as my room key. So I think that's where it's headed, more technology-based to offset the labor shortage, especially the front desk. Housekeeping, still an issue. We're short-staffed. I don't think we're in a bad a situation as last year. We probably had some towers closed down, some room floors out because we just couldn't clean them fast enough. But I think we're in a better place labor-wise, but I think it's going to be an ongoing problem.
Michael, how about from your perspective? You just did a lot of hiring to open your restaurant. Was it hard to find people?
It was hard to get people in the door. So when we first put out our applications or our job postings, we had about 200 applicants apply, schedule interviews, and confirm interviews. From that, we had about 35 people show up. So we're looking at, this 100 and something people that just had no intention of showing up. But of those 35 people, the people that we interviewed and the people that we hired, which was about 90% of them, are incredible. And we're very fortunate to have them. But when we talk about these labor shortages, it's that incentive to get people in the door too. So from a culinary and a back of house standpoint, we're now paying more in labor than I've ever seen before. We're getting ACC graduates coming in and demanding $20 an hour. And people are paying it too. As a CIA grad, when I first got done culinary school, I was making $8.75 an hour, and 20 of my 60 hours a week were off the books. And I wasn't getting paid for that. So who knows what I was making. But I think that as an industry within this kind of like hospitality industry, we really have to assess why these shortages are happening, what is the reason for it. And then ultimately, as businesses, we need to assess a way that's going to make it feasible and sustainable to go on in the future. Because as it stands right now for smaller independent restaurants, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to be able to hit these margins that'll actually turn a profit.
Any other panelists want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think labor is continuing to be a major issue for all the Jersey Shore businesses right now. I know that the labor rates are higher. The lack of J-1 visa students is a major, major issue. You look at a business like Maury's Piers, they are still 800 employees short of reaching their goal. And I don't know if you've seen their major employment campaign, but they came up with a very creative employment campaign to try to get people to apply. But the convention center is still 12 operations people short, and we can't even get applications. So yeah, that's still a concern. Higher labor costs and the lack of the J-1 visa students is a major concern. We're still trying to overcome those issues. But the industry is resilient and they're innovative, and they've figured a way to get around some of those issues, and they'll continue to work harder to provide the service to the visitor. But labor is still an issue.
I would just add to that the labor force for the broader economy has come back. I mean, it fell precipitously, obviously, in the early part of the COVID. And it has come back. It's up about 3% year on year right now, but it still is down almost 3% pre-pandemic. So I think that all of these comments, to some extent, and I do think you're right. I think this is not unique to AC, hardly, right? And it's certainly something that we continue to read about kind of on a national level and in the broader hospitality industry that I don't think is probably going away anytime soon. And to the extent that it feeds into higher wage costs, right? As Michael's saying, that's going to show up on the menu, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, we tell our prospective students, if you want to get a job guaranteed when you graduate, take a hospitality program because there's so many opportunities out there. So it's a good time to be a student graduating right now. Everybody wants you. So thank you for your comments. Okay, so we talked about, of course, the gas prices, inflation, the labor shortage. Do you anticipate anything else impacting this summer? Anybody want to jump in on that one?
From a food and beverage standpoint, obviously one of the biggest concerns is always going to be climate change. Whether that be any type of disease that's going through crops, anything that's going to cause a wrinkle in our food chain is going to have a direct reflect on the broader economy, right? Like we saw eggs, romaine, avocados, recalls on flowers, E. coli in spinach or lettuce. This all has an effect on the consumer and ultimately pricing, and then it trickles down into places not generating enough revenue, doing labor cuts or layoffs, and that's something that is always kind of within the picture in my view. But I think as a society, we're just kind of able to bounce around between these walls of what's going to happen next. We just went through this life-altering situation being COVID, and we're all sitting here today, no masks, and listening to us talk about what's going on. So it's a clear reflection of how resilient we are as a society, but also a city and a region. So whatever happens, I think that we're going to get through it, but we just have to be prepared.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think you always got to, with only having 90 days of the summer, weather plays a big factor into it. So I hate to say the R word, rain. So, if you get some rainy weekends, it throws the numbers off a little bit. Same way in the winter, you say with snow, you get a snow out weekend, it throws the numbers off.
Yeah.
So weather is a big factor, especially in our area, especially in Wildwood also.
Oh, sure.
So.
Yeah, we always say the difference between a good season and a great season is the weather. So you can never predict that. So weather could influence things. But again, I go back to the resiliency of the industry. And we looked at Hurricane Sandy. The industry came together and overcame that with innovative programs. And then you look at inflationary years where we have major recessions. We've overcome that. We overcame the pandemic. So I think we're reactive, we're proactive, and we're very innovative in this industry, able to react to pressures that come upon us. So there's no way to predict, but I think we've been through enough that we know how to react to major pressures that come on board. So I think we're in a good position. Let's hope for great weather.
Oliver, anything to add?
I don't think so. I think the seasonal, the weather is always an important wild card, and obviously barring any kind of major, financial crises, that would, suddenly make everyone become a little bit more kind of cautious, to some extent might. But these are things obviously,
Right.
very hard to predict.
We can't really control. Okay, and my last question before we open it up to the audience, let's look at this from the perspective of opportunities. We talked a lot about challenges. Do you see any opportunities that can make this, 2023 a really good year? Anybody?
Well, I see the market expanding. This year, we've gone further out in our marketing efforts than ever before right now, because we understand that people are concerned about flying, and that pull has expanded. The marketing reach has expanded. So we've expanded our marketing all the way into Ohio, of course up into Canada, because Canada is open right now, all the way down into southern Virginia and up to southern New England. So that market has expanded from the traditional tri-state area or the 160-mile area. And mentioning bringing new customers in, we look at our website analytics, and on average, about 70% of all unique visitors to the website are new visitors. In some of the months, it goes as high as 90%. So new people are looking at us. They're looking at the Jersey Shore for vacation opportunities. And we just have to convert those to visitors.
Anybody else have anything to add? Any opportunities you see, or any challenges that we haven't discussed yet?
So from my perspective with conventions, we're trying to leverage some of our relationships with our Las Vegas properties. So bringing in new customers into the area. We've done probably over the last 2 months some site inspections with clients, potential clients that haven't been to Atlantic City before, that use our Las Vegas property. So we're trying to leverage that East Coast, West Coast rotation for conventions. So that's something we're always looking at. Challenges, I think future challenges we're going to have for the city is gaming in New York City.
Yeah.
I think that's a major one that should have us concerned a little bit. We need to be proactive into it. Our properties are reinvesting into our properties. Hopefully that'll create a destination to come here. The Orange Loop, investing in that area, investing in the city, making Atlantic City a destination, not just a casino destination.
Anyone else, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that. I think that's, as you think about challenges, although I kind of think about that challenge, one that is kind of a medium term, like probably 3 years off, maybe 2 to 3 years off before it becomes, not to say that, probably shouldn't start thinking about it in 2023. Obviously, I think a lot of people probably already are thinking about it, but 2026 and beyond, I think that becomes a very important challenge that the gaming industry, in particular Atlantic City, is going to have to, will be confronted with.
Anything to add, Michael?
Yeah, I just want to mention one other thing. That, the expansion of international marketing by our Department of Travel and Tourism under our Executive Director, Jeff Vassar, has expanded our marketing into Europe right now by opening offices in Germany, England, and a few other countries, and including Canada, where they're actively going after international business coming into either Philadelphia or Newark. So I think that's an exciting new opportunity that they're pursuing right now.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Challenges from a hospitality standpoint. I mean, everything that we kind of just talked about being an existing challenge. I think for me personally, and my skill set and what I do, I look at automation, AI as being the biggest kind of like challenge and threat to my industry. I got bored one night and went on ChatGPT, whatever it's called, and it essentially, in theory, created an entire restaurant, from a pro forma to a P&L to a theoretical menu to this, that, and the other. So looking at this and saying, wow, what I just spent the last 6 months doing, this thing did in a matter of 30 seconds, just given prompts. And I think with that, it's, again, as a challenge or a threat, you have operators coming up who maybe are not as knowledgeable or not within that skill set to really maintain a responsible business doing so, because now they have that information. On the other side, AI and this artificial intelligence offers opportunities to now target different markets and figure out what their consumer profiles are and essentially write an algorithm to be able to market to them directly, whether that be they're searching for East Coast things to do, or they're on Priceline and they're going to Philadelphia and they have a car rental, and you have a direct marketing line to them. So in the words of a band of mine, the future freaks me out as far as what we're looking at. But from a more like holistic level, I'm very excited for the opportunities of collaboration within Atlantic City. Obviously, I'm the newcomer at the table here, and I want to prove myself within Atlantic City, not just within the hospitality industry, but also within our community. So it's one of those things where I see a lot of collaboration already happening. I see a lot of biz dev conversations already happening, but I think that there's always an opportunity to take it a step further, and there's always an opportunity to do things more within the private sector to improve our city and make it that much more palatable to people who maybe haven't given us a chance before. And I think that helps everybody sitting here today realize a dream of Atlantic City and improve our sectors and businesses.
Thank you. Excellent. So that is the end of my questions, and we'd like to open it up now for the audience, if anyone has a question in our in-person audience, and then we'll open it up to our internet.
Hi, Michelle Giampolo. Ben, I have a question for you. As you talked about reaching out to other markets where you would be airline dependent to be able to bring those folks in, could you comment on the role of the Atlantic City Airport in that marketing campaign, and then the impact of the sudden withdrawal of Sun Country Airlines coming into the market this summer?
Yeah, we mainly go after the drive-in market, of course. We have very, very little fly drive coming into the Wildwoods. I think when you get into Atlantic City, when you get into Newark, Elizabeth, some of those other markets, they're more heavily dependent on air travel. But we're marketing to the families that would get into a car and drive. I see very little fly drive market for us, to be honest with you. I would suspect, though, if airline capacity would increase in Atlantic City with more flights in different markets, that could change somewhat. But I think the majority, if we're going after volume and masses, we're looking at that drive-in customer. So we don't really go after the fly market at all.
Thank you. Any other questions from our in-person audience before we go to our internet viewers? John?
Hi, I'm with the Hughes Center for Public Policy here at Stockton, and we've done a couple public opinion polls on legal cannabis. In both of our recent polls, the public was evenly split on whether they would support the shore tourism industry incorporating cannabis lounges or other cannabis-related attractions into the industry. Do you see that happening anytime soon, or how likely or unlikely do you think that is?
Well, I thought the city passed an ordinance that they were going to make a green zone, correct? The city already passed an ordinance that they're going to have a green zone for cannabis lounges and everything else. As far as cannabis tourism goes, I'm kind of split on it myself. I think it's got some benefits for the city if you're going to develop an area, especially, the city doesn't have a great image in certain areas. If you're able to develop it with this cannabis tourism and add to the city, I think it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Don't know what kind of people it's going to attract, I guess, is the downfall.
Sounds like it's helping the Orange Loop, right?
It's interesting because we see this conjugation of people wanting to come and purchase legal marijuana at the stores, but that's the only touch point. So they're not going to the coffee shops. They're not going to the other businesses. I'm going to have to recuse myself on this one because there's a lot of invested parties on my side that are involved in cannabis and everything. But from looking down at my apartment, which is on top of a cannabis store, I see a lot of people. I don't see any other dollars being spent there. However, when this conversation first came about 3 or 4 years ago, whenever it was, the same question was posed. And weed is different than alcohol. I think that you're going to have a tolerance to it so long as you're a longtime consumer. I believe that there's medical properties that can be beneficial. My mom being a breast cancer survivor, but I don't believe that you can go out and enjoy yourself the same way you could have having a cocktail at a bar responsibly. Obviously, I had my teenage years and I've done some stupid things, but coming from a firsthand perspective, I think that the economic implications, if taxed correctly and if controlled correctly, can be very beneficial within a local market. But the socioeconomic repercussions could be detrimental to a city that is now trying to market itself as a family year-round resort.
But if if the CRDAs put an influx of money into the Orange Loop and make that, a cannabis district, that's only going to help expand your businesses also with people feeling, safe to walk through the Orange Loop.
Right.
I think,
So long as there's that cross kind of consumer path
Right.
there. But to your point, we have security guards in my parking lot. We have security guards out front of the store. So there is that general sense of security there now. There's more improved lighting. But again, it comes down from the consumer perspective. Who's coming to these stores? Mm-hmm. Why are they coming to Atlantic City rather than going to the Botanist out in EHT? Who is it driving?
I would just add as two final comments. One, I think that in terms of picking up on your point, John, there's like this 50-50 split, right? There is an obvious negative, what I would call like a negative externality associated with, having large open air, obviously, you can't, even if you were to confine it to a district, like you're saying, I agree that there could be some clear economic benefits from that. But then on the other side, the negative externalities associated with it, right, in terms of thinking about the cost benefit, right? And the second point I would make is I don't see how that becomes, given what's happening across the country, this doesn't become any kind of real obvious, in my mind, competitive advantage to Atlantic City, right? I mean, I was in Vegas like a year ago, and just stroll down the Strip in Vegas if you haven't had a chance in the last year, and you get a sense of, so in terms of like thinking about it as like a real competitive advantage or something that's going to add materially to the package of amenities that AEC is providing, I don't buy that argument.
All right, thank you. Good question. Sarah, do we have any from our internet audience?
Sure. We have a marketing question. So I'm going to read it out in length, and any of the panelists, please feel free to pick up on this. So the question reads, I am hearing the importance on local and transient folks. What is the proactive marketing plan to attract more of our local folks to Atlantic City? Would video commercials to local folks be a secondary campaign for this summer? And if so, what would the soundbite be that local businesses could also use in their video marketing?
Anybody want to take that on?
Well, I think when you're talking about the local market, you're also talking about the second homeowners, which is a huge portion. In Cape May County, I think Cape May County has the largest number of second home owners in the state right now. Those second homeowners live in Philadelphia, they live in New York, North Jersey. They're outer market that happen to be in the inner market. So a local campaign to them, it's much cheaper to reach them locally than it is to reach them in their home market. We're in two of the largest or the highest media markets, most expensive media markets in the country. So if you're marketing to those visitors where they live, it's a lot more expensive than to market them locally and where they're staying. So I think a local program might be beneficial.
Any other comments on that?
I guess the question would be, what do you define the local market to be? My definition of local market would be the tri-state area. Anything driving distance would be considered a local market.
Yeah.
If you're talking, Ventnor, Margate, Egbert Township, that's more so not a market we're marketing to as a casino. I'm sure local-wise, the Orange Loop would be promoting to the local market.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it's local-wise, I think it's word of mouth from our area, social media efforts, I guess, since we don't get a paper anymore. So, but just promoting the restaurants we got going on, the shows coming up to the local market.
We just went through an exercise where we put together our target consumer, and I was tasked with coming up with a hypothetical person, demographic, age, beliefs, income, education, this, that, and the other. And then from there, we decide what our kind of direct path of marketing is. And being somebody who, born and raised in Absecon, lived in Ocean City, now lives in Atlantic City, came back after living in Philly and decided to go to Maynard's one day and ran into my entire graduating year of high school there. I think, everybody's going to have a different idea of who their ideal target consumer is. And it's really just, what is the path to get there? Like, I always have my cell phone on me. I'm scrolling through Instagram, I'm looking at social media, I'm doing this, that, and the other on there. I'm not necessarily reading a paper, or I'm not listening to the radio aside from like Spotify or Apple Music. So for me, the easiest path is for people to market to me is going to be on social media or online, or through geotagging or geolocation software, given Snapchat or whatever. But Atlantic City itself we can have a unified message that appeals to a grander audience than this kind of shooting darts at a dartboard and hoping that something hits there. And I think that's the appeal of, we have a beautiful shoreline, we have a beautiful city, we have a lot of people who are interested in making this happen, but ideal marketing, it's everything. It's what catches your eye. You're driving down the highway, you see a billboard, you read a newspaper, you're on your phone, you listen to music. There's so many different medias. It's just what's going to stick.
Do we have time for one more question, Sarah?
We have time, and I guess I'll make it as I hem and haw, I'm sorry. So are there any more questions from our in-person audience? From our online audience?
I think John has one.
I'm curious who typically comes to the Jersey Shore, who we're trying to get. Is there such a thing as a typical Jersey Shore visitor? And if so, have those demographics stayed the same, or are they changing?
They made a show about it. Jersey Shore. Kidding.
Not funny.
I don't have unfortunately, I don't work on the marketing side for the casino, so I couldn't give any perspective from that. So
I can address that somewhat. It goes across all demographics, but if our target market are females, because they are the decision makers of the families. So we target females 25 to 54. That's our core demographic. But if you're looking at income demographics, you're looking across all different levels of income demographics. We target household income of 100,000 plus, and that's kind of mid. That would be the mid range, and we go across all different income levels. So it could be families, it could be grandparents, it could be multi-generational marketing to the multi-generational vacationers. It could be the millennials, the couples. So it goes across all demographics and all different ranges. So it's a broad-based marketing campaign that you have to implement.
I would just add there, and I don't remember, John, the last time that this was done, but they used to be.
When was the last?
It's been some time, right,
Yeah, the
Jane?
visitor's profile.
Because I remember that Brian used to do this, Tyrell used to do these periodically, because I know that I worked with Brian in the past on some of these, but it's been a while.
Yeah, I think, Sarah, do you know, was it 2018 or? Yeah, 2018 was the last one.
Yeah, but
So
it's a
maybe
good question
time.
in terms of tracking, like what is the average or typical look like?
I did read the American Gaming Association reported that the age of the average gambler is getting younger. So that's one thing. All right, Sarah, any other questions?
No, I think we're good.
All right, well, thank you everyone for your attention, and thank you to our panel for your wonderful comments. Let's give them a round of applause.